This video is going to be my examination of the outside linebacker or edge position group for the 2025 NFL Draft. I'm going to try to get one of these positional videos out each week. This will probably end up being quite lengthy. Excuse the title, referring to top 10. There's a little bit of a misnomer there. I'm not necessarily ranking these guys in order, and there will be some really good players left out of this video at some point. Just to get this produced, I had to kind of stop the list. I originally wanted to do a top 12 here, but I'll be honest with you, I consider this group to be so deep that once you get to that 8, 9, 10 range, you start looking at guys that you would rank 12th or 13th, and you say they're somewhat interchangeable at times. I'm not saying that we have the deepest edge defender draft ever, but this one, the further you look, the better the talent pool appears, if you ask me. If it's got something for everyone. If you want a technical pass rusher, a guy who's kind of pre-installed, then Donovan Ezeiruaku from Boston College is your guy. You got some maulers like Jack Sawyer, a long athlete, small forward types like Braden Swinson that you see there, and then your athletic freaks like a Shamar Stewart who doesn't come with the type of production that maybe you want. The overall best guy clearly is Abdul Carter from a pass rush standpoint. This is going to be an examination of the group, and then some evaluations of each player. I don't put film on my YouTube channel. However, I will have a link to a shared document for you guys where the film is organized for you, where my evaluations / rankings, if you will, fall short. Refer to the film. Like I said, there are some guys who are going to be missing here. Clearly, Landon Jackson and Kyle Kennard are the two that are not in the scrolling set of pictures. Number one and number two will not be talked about in this video. Both extremely underrated. Look at Kennard's game against Will Campbell and LSU for evidence piece number one of what he's capable of. Josiah Stewart is another of my personal favorites as a late third round, fourth round guy if he's still there. But it's crazy to me to think about. You might have 14 or 15 guys selected by the time we get done with the fourth round, and I mean the typical fourth round, not just the comp pick formula. This is based on a ton of film study. Probably too much. Like I said, I will link to you a shared document that proves that the work has been done, meaning you can agree or disagree with some of the evaluations that I give and the points of concern. That's fine. But hopefully you can agree if you're willing to click on the link and go see that I have the film organized, labeled, custom labeled using my own system, that the work has been completed and the evaluations are my own. I don't wait for other people to get done with theirs. So let me explain to you exactly what I mean. You'll see a list of 3 players scrolling through here that'll be on the shared document. These are not clickable links, even though they look like it. You'll generally get pass rush moves, run defense for each guy, for each edge defender, and then either their best play, meaning their singular best play that I've seen on film, or their best move. And in the case of Ezeiruaku, who's going to scroll through here in a moment, you'll get his best move, which is the Euro step. It's the best move in the draft, or it's the best Euro step in the draft, and really the most unique one, I think, out of all the edge rushers. If you think that my rankings or evaluations don't go to enough depth, that's fine. Feel free to refer to the film if you want. As I've continued to look at more and more guys in this draft, offensive line and edge defenders, it's a very deep group. It wouldn't surprise me if after year one, the guys that are drafted in the 8 to 15 range have impacted their teams, maybe more so than other players that were picked before them. If you are willing to click the link, I would suggest maybe holding off to do so until the end, because each tab for the players will have 5 to 6 bullet points with my evaluations or some analysis, along with pass rush film, like I said, run defense, and then their best play, and also the list of games that I use to study. It's impossible to watch each and every one. The good thing, by focusing on offensive line, it really allowed me to see a ton of defensive line, inside linebacker, edge defender players, and then try to evaluate them. Each evaluation that you see is my own and organized or originates from the film that is available at either of those 3 links at the bottom of each tab. Let's get to the first 3 guys. Abdul Carter is going to kick it off. I think he's the consensus number 1 guy. Again, these are not necessarily in order 1 to 10, so don't ask why a particular player is at 8 and someone else is at 4. This is just the order in which I completed them. I did want to begin with the guy who is generally regarded as the best one. Look, he watching him play through injury, ignore the injury essentially against Notre Dame, and then it come out later that he had something wrong, like stress fracture in his foot that he didn't even know about. He's a true warrior out there at outside linebacker. 23 sacks in his career over 42 games. So 11 sacks had occurred prior to his full-time movement to outside linebacker or edge rusher. At Penn State, played against a high level of competition, and you'll see that in the document if you click on it. The games that I scouted, all from 2024, the ones from 2024, Ohio State, Maryland, Oregon, Illinois, and then Ohio State from 23 and Maryland from 23, Notre Dame in 2024 as well. He plays at a different speed. He plays downhill, able to take over games at times. A couple of games I've wondered about what cleats he had on because he did kind of hit the deck a little bit more often than you would think for a spectacular athlete like you've got. But even as a true freshman, he flashed. I think he had 4.5 sacks that year. For them to finally move him wholesale to outside linebacker in 2024, it worked out. It made him, millions of dollars, and helped Penn State probably recruit more edge defenders in the future if they didn't already have enough evidence to do so. He's a top three talent in this draft, obviously, with Travis Hunter. Experience at inside linebacker and outside linebacker, I think, bodes well. They utilized him in that spy technique a lot in 2024 in obvious passing downs. He can track down pretty much any quarterback trying to get to the outside, trying to escape. So a 3-man rush, I call it a 3+1, with the spy being the fourth defender. And he performed at a high level pretty much everywhere they put him. Also, it should be noted, 24 tackles for loss in his final season at Penn State. A huge number. He's disruptive, a great player. For me, obviously the best guy that's out there. A number 2, one that's closer for me than maybe others would evaluate, is Mike Green. First of all, he's got extremely precise pass rush moves that he can execute at full speed. He's a blur when coming downhill. He's better against the run than people may describe as well. I did have 5 games from 2024 for him. Of course, 3 of them are against what we would refer to as lesser competition. He did play against Ohio State in 2024. I think he had 1 sack in that game, but I might be wrong. Virginia Tech game from this season, and then Southern Miss, Louisiana Monroe, and Louisiana. 17 sacks this year, led NCAA, led college football. He did have 5 2-sack games. He seems to be a guy that when he's got a matchup, he can win. There's really not much you can do. He's an A+ speed pass rusher, but the moves are even better, in my opinion. And when I say that, I mean refined pass rush moves. Him, along with Ezeiruaku, are the 2 guys that I think have. Scourton also has some really defined, precise pass rush moves. Those 2 guys, though, Green and Ezeiruaku, I think they have versatile moves, generally speed or outside or topside rush guys, but the inside moves can be utilized to complement those things if tackles are, quote, oversetting. I think he's better against the run than many have described. Very powerful strike, particularly against tight ends. Also, I've noticed him fold inside after setting the edge or setting the tight end / tackle to the inside. I've noticed him fold back inside numerous times to make tackles. I think he's a day one impact player. Not evaluating, the off-field concerns. To me, he's as good as it gets in most edge defender drafts, except for this one, which of course includes an absolute phenom like an Abdul Carter. And then the third guy that we'll talk about here in the beginning certainly will probably go later in the draft than those 2, and that's James Pierce. His height, to me, is the interesting element. 6'5". He's got a great frame. Wins versus tight ends in the run game. I think that's going a little bit underserved or under-talked about with James Pierce Jr., in fact. He's a very athletic outside linebacker. He had 10 sacks, I think, in 2023. 7.5 sacks this past year. But his work against the run I think, deserves mention, especially against tight ends. A lot of these guys, when they're in a 6 technique, and I'll describe a 6 technique as head up on the tight end versus outside shade or an outside 9 technique alignment, a lot of these guys in the draft are playing the 6 technique better than college athletes or college edge defenders have in the past. coming into their rookie season in the NFL. James Pierce is one of them. I think he's very strong at the point of attack when he's in a head-up alignment against tight ends. Great frame to build on, like I said, at 6'5". I think he actually measured at 6'5", not just one of those guys who was reported to be 6'5" and then measured at 6'3 and 1/8 or 6'3 and a quarter. 4.47 in the 40, which I don't think that's necessarily flowing through. Looks like I've got a mistake there on the screen, so my apologies for that. Also a really high RAS score, 9.34 RAS score. He dominated Iowa in the bowl game in 2023, had 1.5 sacks, had a pick 6. He's sneaky good in coverage. And the reason why I included him as one of the reasons why I included him in my third guy to break down is I think he's a little more complete against the run and then in coverage than is being presented. There has been discussion, and I've seen things read or posted about his sacks going down in 2024. Well, I think he's got a wider array of skills. Maybe he was used in coverage more often. I could be wrong. Maybe teams decided to. I'll tell you what I didn't see, and I'll have to talk about this a little bit later for two players. I didn't see, of course, in college, so much of the offense is check with me, meaning the offense has a call. They line up and look at it, check with the sideline. Okay, do we want to run this play, or do we want to flip it, or do we want to change the play entirely? I did not see, nor do I suspect, that teams were trying to run at him. And I will give you two guys, at least one in this video, whereby I know that teams were running directly at them or running read option plays away from them to take advantage of their poor or inconsistent pursuit. James Pierce is not one of those guys. I don't know that why his sacks went down, but to me, he looks like a guy who could come into the NFL and contribute against the pass and is better against tight ends in the run game and in coverage, particularly into the boundary, than most others would describe. Finally, I think he'll be a great option in the first round for the Chargers, the Ravens, the Lions, among others. Next trio of guys that I want to talk about in quick succession is Jalen Walker, Shamar Stewart, and Mykel Williams. Of course, two of those guys are teammates. Walker, to me, is one of the more interesting guys in the draft overall because of his, number one, versatility as an inside linebacker, outside linebacker. His measurables, 6'1", I think arm length, kind of precludes him in some people's mind for being a full-time edge defender. And look, his pass rush moves are somewhat limited because he spent so much time at inside linebacker. But he's got, number one, big play potential. He closes down or redirects to the football, pursuit, if you will, better than pretty much anybody in the draft. He closes space, fits in gaps exceptionally well. I think he's a top-of-the-line football player in this draft. Do I think he's a better edge defender than Shamar Stewart and Mykel Williams as a standalone player? No, but the versatility is extremely notable to me because of how he plays at an inside linebacker consistently against the run, as well as rushing the passer from an edge defender position. And then along with that, takes great pass drops from both of those locations. He's an extremely unique blend, if you ask me, from that standpoint. The height and the arm length, does it push a person away or a front office away from drafting him as an edge defender? Possible. I think in this day and age, he's got tremendous usage as a boundary side inside linebacker, either in coverage or walking up and blitzing from the edge in particular matchups. I scouted a ton of games of his because I don't get a chance to watch a lot of college football during the regular season. I wish that I did, but Saturdays are often dedicated to NFL film and trying to get previews out. So I was just so surprised and shocked with everything I saw, especially the pass coverage. His ability to get in the right window at the correct depth was notable to me. I scouted 5 games from 2024. If you click in the document later, you're welcome to check that out if you want. He had a 4.5 40. I think he's immediate starter at boundary inside linebacker with some usage as a hybrid rush guy. Incredible talent, like I said. In my opinion, I think he's a top 8-12 pick in this draft, but I recognize he may fall later. As a Ravens fan, I certainly don't want him to be available for a team like the Cincinnati Bengals or something like that. That versatility in alignment and then the athleticism to close down space and go get after people, whether it's quarterback or running back, is very tantalizing for myself personally as someone who advocates for having as many high-level athletes as possible on the defensive side. I think Jalen Walker fits that bill, and I think he's an immediate starter for pretty much every team in the NFL. But I recognize that, there's some evaluations out there that are not as high on him as I am here. Shamar Stewart, incredibly physically gifted. I think everybody understands that. The lack of production, I will spend some time talking about, but a 4.59 40 at his height and weight. Now, it is notable that Nic Scourton came in significantly lighter than he was listed. I think some people had him listed at like 277, and then he weighed in at 257. And Shamar Stewart was a little bit lighter than his listed weight, but still in line with a guy with a great frame, freak athlete. I do think he's more effective in a three-point stance, essentially a defensive end, not an outside linebacker into the boundary who would be dropping out in coverage often, like some of the guys that we're going to talk about here, and I kind of talked about with Pierce as well. I scouted 3 games film of him, and they all looked the same. Well, I got to watch him and Scourton. I didn't need to see much else because, number one, the production's just not there. I mean, the film does not line up with the athletic testing. I still think that, at his age, he's 21 years old. He won't turn 22 until November. He's a great fit for teams starting as early as the Saints at 9. I don't know that he gets past them, but I could be wrong. Again, the Bengals at 17, the Chargers at 22. I don't think he's there for teams like the Ravens and the Lions, but if he is there for Detroit at 28, they're taking him. I doubt if he gets past the Ravens at 27. In fact, in reality, I don't think he's really there. A sack and a half in 2024 and 6 TFLs. There's just really no way to work around it. The production is not there, but you do have great get off, a great frame. His pass rush moves are not as precise, even as his teammate on the other side, Scourton. He did play extremely well against Texas in 2024. I think he had 5 or 6 tackles and 2 or 3 tackles for loss. 4.5 sacks in 37 career games. It should give fan bases pause if they're expecting him to come in and produce 10, 12 sacks in his rookie year. I would say the chances of that occurring are lower than with other guys like a Carter, like a Green, or even a Pierce if he was to go somewhere and get significant reps. But Shamar Stewart's so athletic, so powerful, and appears to be so coachable that nothing would surprise me with that type of athleticism for him to come in as a rookie and make an impact. The pass rush moves, the precision of them, it doesn't have a spin move like a Scourton. He certainly doesn't have a Euro step, a well-timed one like Ezeiruaku. His speed rush, while occasionally dominant and very swift and sudden, is not the same as a Carter or a Green who can kind of get up under tackles. So when I say the film doesn't line up with that athletic testing, that's what I mean. But it doesn't mean that the talent or the capability or potential certainly isn't there. And then the final guy with respect to this trio of players will be Mykel Williams, 6'5", teammate of Walker's, obviously 6'5", 260. I think a 4.77 40. I don't think he completed as much testing as other guys, but I could be wrong there. He's very powerful and long. He's got great range. Impacts the quarterback's throwing lanes consistently. I scouted the same 5 games, in fact, that I scouted for Jalen Walker, I scouted for Williams. That's what makes it so great for teams like Georgia and the SEC in general, but also Ohio State, Penn State. You can look at multiple guys at the same time and kind of make notes and gather film. He does have versatility as a pass rusher and in alignment. 5 technique, which outside shade of the tackle. 9 technique, outside shade of the tight end. I do wonder if he's more of a boundary side guy than a field side player, but he looks like a guy to me who, in 2 or 3 years, could outperform all of the evaluations or predictions that people are giving him, myself included. The frame, he's probably going to be 6'5", 275, somewhere in that range. In a couple of years, plays downhill. His coverage ability to the boundary should be, it's surprising. And in fact, I put it as one of the folders in his, in the shared document that I gave you guys. If you don't know, when you click on one of the hyperlinks, it'll take you to a folder where I have the edge defenders totally dedicated for you to look at. His coverage ability, I think, he's very aware into the boundary. You've got 2 examples of it against Clemson in week 1 last year in 2024. Something to note with him, besides the height, the range, the athleticism, and the versatility, is he's still only 20 years old. He'll turn 21, I believe, in mid-June. You're welcome to let me know if I made a mistake there, but the way that he plays football downhill and with awareness and versatility for his size, speed, and athleticism and age, I think you're looking at a guy who could be a long-term Pro Bowl player, even though the total output of sacks, he only has 14 career sacks and 23 TFLs. So, compare that to a guy like Abdul Carter, 12 sacks and 24 TFLs in one season. Part of it is who Michael Williams is playing behind. And also, I think the style of defense that Georgia plays at times can suppress some of the statistical contributions of their players. It's a team-oriented style of defense. If you ask me, all you got to do is watch his against against Texas this year to see the level of talented potential. 4 sacks, 1 pass deflected, I think 3 TFLs against Texas in 2 games in 2024. Kind of gives a hint as to his potential long term. I want to make sure that I'm crystal clear. So there will be in the comment section and in the description for this video a link to a share document, share drive, if you will, whereby you can see my list with players, the game studied, essentially the screenshots that I'm having flow through now, with the clickable links at the bottom for pass rush, reps, run defense, and then their best play or best move, like I mentioned before, at the bottom of the screen. You can go view all of those for yourself and determine if the film lines up with the things that I'm saying, number 1, or number 2. If you want to utilize some of those to create content for yourself, go right ahead. So the next guy that we'll talk about is one of my personal favorites. I have to be honest up front. Nic Scourton or Scourton, 6'3" and an eighth, 6'3" and a quarter, 257. So a little shorter, a little lighter than he was listed at during the season. A 4'7", 40, a little slower, if you will, than his teammate Shamar Stewart on the other side. But number 1, explosive and sudden athlete. Looks plenty powerful and precise with his pass rush moves. I think he would be the 3rd or 4th best guy in terms of the precision of his pass rush moves, how quickly and naturally they occur in the context of a pass rush. He can win with speed or with power. He's got a great frame. He did only have 5 sacks and 14 TFLs in 2024, his first season with Texas A&M. Had 10 sacks the year before at Purdue. Played against a high level of competition, and I think acquitted himself very well. High motor with great pursuit. I had 6 games of film to study of him, 3 of which were from 2023 when he was with Purdue against Michigan, Illinois, and Ohio State, and then 3 from this past year, the same 3 that I utilized to make an evaluation of Shamar Stewart. 17 sacks and 37 career games, a little bit more productive than Stewart, also 31 TFLs. So he's explosive, plays across the line of scrimmage. I don't necessarily think he's a guy who drops in coverage a lot, but I did have 2 good reps of him dropping in coverage to the boundary. And in fact, one of them against LSU, he was covering a wheel route, which kind of surprised me, to be honest with you, that he was capable of doing that. Great frame, the production in college all fits with him being a late first-round draft pick. I've seen some projections that are mid to late second round. I think that's a little bit too late for him. He's got a very quick spin move that he seems to go to as a counter to offensive linemen, either like on an overset, spin to the inside, or threatening to the inside and spinning to the outside. That spin move looks very well defined, and that's why I use the term or the phrase precise pass rush moves. Very physical, great motor. Like I said, he's one of my favorite players in this draft. I recognize that others may not have as high an opinion of him based upon their own evaluation. Donovan Ezeiruaku, hopefully I'm saying that name correctly. First of all, complete pass rush moves. I think him and Green are the guys with the most diversity of moves they can execute naturally and within the flow of the pass rush rep, of the individual play. Great burst, as I mentioned earlier in the lead-in. His Euro step, first of all, he has the best Euro step out of all the edge rushers in the draft, but I think it's probably the best move out of everyone as well. And when he is closing down in 5th gear, A+ closing speed, I do have to mention there is extreme inconsistencies in his pursuit and effort against the run versus against the pass. And I will get into that here in detailed fashion. Virginia Tech 2024, the first probably quarter and a half, it took me until about the 5th play to notice this. Essentially, Virginia Tech was lining up and, in my opinion, checking to the sideline, flipping the back, and they were running zone read away from Ezeiruaku, basically because his pursuit was non-existent. And those run plays really opened up. They really gashed Boston College's defense, culminating in a touchdown that was away from him. Now, is it all his fault on those plays? No, that's not what I'm saying. But it sticks out like a sore thumb when you watch dozens of college players give extreme effort on every single play. And in fact, Ezeiruaku generally does as well. And I've read some evaluations of him that say he's got great pursuit and great effort. And then when I see the Virginia Tech game, the Pittsburgh game, and even the Missouri game, there's at least 2 to 3 instances in each game. I have 7. So, 2 instances in each game. And our saying was always, if you get 2 instances of a player not giving 110% pursuit/effort, that's 2 too many, and 3 is a real problem. Having said that, still a great prospect, even though he's, quote, smaller, 6'2", 248, is 4'6", 240. I suspect that when he's in 5th gear, bursting, exploding off the line of scrimmage, that he's better than a 4.62, meaning his first step and a half, 2 steps, if you will, is in line with guys like Carter, Green, among others, getting off the line of scrimmage. Those DNFs, or zeros, if you will, on run plays away from him are separate from those pass rush situations. It took me a while to recognize it in the Virginia Tech game. It's my suspicion. You're welcome to go watch the film. I actually have it cut up in his run defense folder and see for yourself how often the Virginia Tech quarterback checked over to the sideline, flipped the running back, and then ran zone read away from him. About early to mid second quarter is when I felt like I started to recognize it. But look, his pass rush moves, I would say he's comparable to Green with the diversity, the effectiveness, the professional level of his pass rush moves. He can disappear underneath of tackles on speed rush or topside rushes. Additional to that, he can win inside. This is, though he may be, quote, smaller than some of the other guys in this draft, Stewart, Scourton, Braden Swinson, who I'll talk about in a moment, this is a guy who comes pre-installed with his moveset. It would not surprise me at all if he plays less in run situations in 2024, unless that issue can be fixed by someone. Maybe it's not a long-term issue. Maybe Boston College's defense wasn't coached to the level that's needed in terms of effort on run plays away from you. I have no idea. I just know it showed up on film, and I wouldn't be doing what I think is my job as an analyst if I didn't relay it and point it out to you after seeing it on film. Essentially, I would be lying. Maybe some NFL team, the Ravens, the Lions, fixes it and it no longer shows up. You're welcome to click on the links and let me know if you agree with my assertion or not. 30 sacks in 47 career games. Production. Knows what he's doing. 22 tackles for loss this last year at Boston College, and in fact, 47 for his career. Elite talent that if he went to Baltimore, I'd be ecstatic. If he was drafted in Detroit, I would be equally happy. I don't know where he goes. I think there's a range. Is it possible that a team earlier than 27 and 28 sees him as a guy that they can plug in pass rush situations immediately? Absolutely possible. Is it also possible that other teams have seen the negative areas that I mentioned, or negative area that I mentioned, and he falls to the early 30s? That's possible too. I don't think he lasts out of the first round. Just too good, too talented, and got too many well-refined professional level moves for that many teams to choose to pass on. The last 2 guys that I'll discuss here, Jack Sawyer and Braden Swinson. Braden Swinson happens to be one of my personal favorites. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a handful of guys here that should be included. Landon Jackson primarily, Princely Umanlamayan as well, and Josiah Stewart. Those are guys maybe I'll get into in another video if you'd like to see that. You have access to the actual film, so to make evaluations or assessments on your own. If you're interested in what I think about those guys, let me know, and I'll create another video about the additional players. I guess you'd rank them 11 to 15 or 11 to 17, because you're getting to some pretty good talent, some pretty high-level talent, if you ask me, that's probably going to be selected in the 4th round. But in terms of Sawyer, you got a high-motor playmaker who, if his season had ended, if Ohio State wasn't in the college football playoff, what would his evaluation look like? I think he had 4.5 sacks in the college football playoff. He also had all 7 of his passes defense, his knockdowns at the line. occurred in the college football playoff, his stats would look different. Now, maybe his evaluation from NFL front offices would not. Great motor, 6'4", 260. I don't think the arm length is as long as others would like to see it be. This is a guy that gets things done. He's got two really high-level pass rush moves. A couple of variations of a bull rush move, but let's just, conflate them together and say that bull rush. And the second one is it's almost a convergence of, or a mixture of two moves at the same time. He's essentially going power to speed, and you'll see it. I call it a pseudo ghost move. If you look in the document, it's his best move, where he basically is making it look like he's going to bull rush through the outside half of the offensive lineman, or maybe the center of his body, and then swats and rips extremely quickly, and in some cases doesn't even make an attempt to make contact, just rips through, hence the phrase pseudo ghost move. I recognize that his average to above average athleticism is really poorly worded, but compared to other guys who have such high level testing, there's got to be a reason why Sawyer didn't really test at all. I don't think that he had any injuries to deal with, but didn't participate in a lot of testing. I don't think participated at Ohio State's Pro Day, but I could be wrong there. I will be honest with you. I did not really want to like this player when I was starting to watch my eval, because I saw some ugly moves. I saw some ugly pass rush moves. I saw some ugly reactions to the run. And then the more film I watched, the more I liked his game. I have to admit it. Almost reminds me of like an old school basketball player that you play against and you think he ain't that good. And then lo and behold, at the end of the game, he scored 5 or 6 points if you're going to 11, depending on where you're from and what your basketball games go to, and his team generally wins. I made a couple of comparisons online on social media, and they're not NFL or football player comparisons. He reminds me of UFC champion Dricus du Plessis, DDP, who does a lot of things maybe technically wrong as a striker, doesn't seem to be a great wrestler. How fantastic is his takedown defense? You have moments where he's down 2-1 in rounds, or maybe even 1-0, and you're like, he can't win this fight, and he still leaves with the belt. The other one that he reminded me of is probably outdated. So if you're young, perhaps you won't get it, or my ability to communicate it effectively could be the issue. But it's Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. He certainly didn't look fast in the movies, kind of lumbering. And you're like, how does he catch people? And then all of a sudden, he just shows up on screen and he kills everybody. That's kind of what Jack Sawyer reminded me of in the college football playoff. Do I want to see him get drafted to the Ravens or the Lions? I think there'll be more talent there at 27 and 28. So where does he go? My gut tells me he's a middle second round selection. Nothing would surprise me in this draft. My gut tells me, somewhere in the 48 to 58 range in that regard. But I could see a front office liking him better than maybe I do, or most people that try to analyze the game do as well. And then the last guy that we'll talk about for the purpose of this video is Braden Swinson. Again, one of my personal favorites, and I may have him overpriced here by being the 10th guy listed. I recognize, like I said, Landon Jackson, Princely Iman Lemayan, among others, are not listed in my video. First of all, I had 5 games film of him. South Carolina, Ole Miss, all from 2024, by the way. Alabama, UCLA, Texas A&M. The reason I mention him is high-level competition. He's a great closer against the pass. That last 4 or 5 yards distance, or maybe even 3 yards distance, he seems to close it better than a 4.80 40 guy, which like you see listed on the screen. Long, great range, somewhat similar to Michael Williams. I think Williams is maybe his frame looks like it'd be easier for him to add bulk. I think his burst is underrated. He doesn't get off the line like a 4.8 guy, if you ask me. And he does have quick counters. This is a very professional pass rusher from a move standpoint. Probably right there with Scourton or Scourton in terms of the moves that he has. I think he's got multiple good moves. In that regard, a step or two above Sawyer, but right there with Scourton. And I think his work against the run, even though, I do have some questions about him in an odd technique. When he's in a 6 technique, head up on a tight end, he's an ass kicker. He's better than people give him credit for. Head up on a tight end, not allowing those tight ends, those free releases up to the linebacker, essentially keeping the strong side inside linebacker clean, such that Swinson is the guy dealing with the tight end and trying to hold him off. I really like his potential. I think he gets picked sooner than a lot of the projections offer. I think he comes kind of pre-installed with being good on whatever stunt or whatever the call is, the pass rush stunt is, and then better against the run than people give him credit. But from an odd technique, there is a difference. From an odd technique, outside the tight end, doesn't appear to be as effective as head up. He did have 7 sacks in a 4-game stretch in 2024. He's got 11 passes defensed and 5 forced fumbles in his career. Very active, if you ask me. Does not stand and watch the pile, especially when the play is away from him, which is why I mentioned his closing speed, his length, and his range being something that is, a tremendous asset. In any case, if you haven't looked at the document yet and you would like to do so, the link will be in the description, also in the comment section. It'll have player evaluations with some notes, very similar to what I just provided to you guys, but also the film available for you to study and the games that I utilize to try to make my evaluations. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comment section. Don't consider the top 10 ranking to be hard-coded. Swinson might not be the 10th best guy. There's other players there. In fact, I really like Kyle Kennard. I think Kyle Kennard, if you're going to truly rank them, probably belongs in a top 10 list. He's so good. He's one of the few guys, along with Landon Jackson, that really appeared to give Will Campbell, the left tackle for LSU, a whole heck of a lot of trouble. I'll try to do a follow-up for this if you'd like to hear evaluations of some of those guys. I do tend to put most of my evaluations organically with film on Twitter and or in my Discord. If you'd like to join either one of my Discords, they're generally for Ravens and or Lions fans. But if there's just general NFL fans who'd like to join my Discord and get some of the draft evaluation with film that I don't put on my YouTube channel, I could certainly start a separate Discord for that group of people. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section, number 1. Number 2, if you think other Ravens, Lions fans, or NFL fans in general would enjoy this analysis with some evaluation and discussion of the film, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.